Welcome to week 3 of Mpai 600 here at Georgetown University. Just a couple of announcements. Paper 1, the collection strategy is due now, tomorrow, yesterday, whenever you're watching this. So I will get those back to you by this time next week. And then just a reminder, congressional walkthrough August 6th at 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I know I mentioned interest last week, and there was some interest. Just let me know when you acknowledge this video if you can attend, if you can't attend, or you can attend via Zoom or in person. So I want to just get a firm head count going forward. So review of last week. Again, we talked about requirements and integrating that into the collection plan. And then what we spent the second part was focus on these intelligence traps, or these analytical traps that our mind focuses on. Again, some key ones that have come up: confirmation bias, which means you believe that you have an initial thought, and then all evidence that comes forward is fashioned under that initial thought. Mirror imaging, where you look at an adversary or competitor and you think they're going to follow the same logic, they're going to come to the same conclusions, they're going to make the same decisions, they have the same incentives that I would if I was in that place. And then this was all illustrated in the Confessions documentary. There are several key points illustrated in there. One, this is classic confirmation bias. The detectives had a theory on who was responsible for the killing, and they went to ridiculous levels to confirm that thesis, with the interrogations, with eliminating other suspects, with ignoring DNA evidence. You had vividness bias, particularly in the way the confessions were played in the courtroom, where he said in that very monotone voice, "I broke into the house, I found the woman, I pinned her down, I pulled her clothes off, and then I'm not going to go into any more detail than that, but that vivid audio tape, when played in front of the jury, biased the jury. And if you want a conviction, well, that will get you the conviction. You'll play on people's biases, particularly the vividness of that description, to get your conviction, and Detective Ford knew that. You have the negative evidence fallacy. There was focus on the positive evidence. They confessed, they committed the crime, they confessed, and here's the confession. Boom, boom, boom. But they didn't flip the question and ask, if these people are guilty, why are we not seeing trace evidence, DNA, motive, timeline, all those other aspects of a crime that need to be of a crime were absent in this case. But no one focused on those negatives. They focused on the positive confession, or the positive evidence confession going forward. And again, the mind doesn't focus on those negative traits, and that was evident in this case and how the jury saw it, judges, prosecutors, etc. And then clientelism. This was a pressure case to get it solved, so you didn't have a bunch of murderers and rapists out there in the community. So there's pressure on the system, there's pressure on the prosecutors, which pressure on the police, which led to these false confessions. So a couple of things just to leave you with. Georgetown values. I don't know if anyone in this class is Catholic or Jesuit or religious. I don't know if that had any impact on whether you wanted to come to Georgetown or not. Probably not. But Georgetown is a Jesuit school, and we try and emphasize a certain amount of values and social justice in our curriculum throughout our multiple courses. So in this case, again, justice was denied for years. These crimes occurred in the late 90s. You saw they were released in 2009, although their convictions weren't vacated. That happened in 2013 after the documentary. And the final judgments final civil lawsuits didn't get settled until 2019, 20 years after the fact. So justice was denied, and there were people who did not have the appropriate scrutiny, and it cost these folks essentially a good portion of their lives. They were spent in jail. And that includes, again, police, detectives, prosecutors, judges, appellate judges, juries, all the way up to the governor's office. So again, there was a failure up and down the chain, and it wasn't just Detective Ford. It was, again, all those elements that I just mentioned. So what I'd hope is that if you're in a position where you can actually impact people's lives, you come at it with a sense of humility, and you come to show proper scrutiny instead of trying to just arrest people for the sake of arresting people and putting people away for the sake of putting people away. And then what I want to leave you with, let me go back. On that same note, a student of mine a few years ago brought up that, we talk about analytical bias in the confessions case study. But this wasn't analytical bias. This was an evil man, Detective Ford, doing evil things. We're going to talk about analytical bias in other cases, the Iraq War, 9/11, etc., where essentially good people still made bad judgments because of these biases that I just talked about. But this wasn't that case. This was an evil person with evil intent doing bad things. I don't know about that. I've thought about that. A student brought that up, and I've thought about that for a long time. And I don't necessarily disagree completely, but I will say a couple of things. One, it wasn't just one man's evil, as I mentioned earlier. You can say Detective Ford was just an evil person, bad apple, what have you. But again, it was an entire system that fell prey to this. Detectives, police department, prosecutors, judges, appellate judges, governor, etc. So I can't just say that all those people are evil. Number one. And number two, I'd just say that given the circumstances, I think we could all be Detective Fords. We could look back and say that's just an evil person, and I would never do that. But I do believe, given the right circumstances, we're all capable of kind of that level of behavior. And that's why, again, I think we have to all be watch out for when are we, we have to, as I mentioned, check our values. When am I doing something that I've gone, because I wanted career advancement, because I wanted to please my boss, but when have I deviated so far from my values and inner judgments that I become something like that. So again, just a lesson for everyone out there, not just an intel lesson, but a kind of a moral, behavioral lesson going forward. So week 3, again, 2 case studies, Pearl Harbor and Yom Kippur War. We're going to look at strategic surprise going forward. And where were the failures? Did the failures, again, for Pearl Harbor and Yom Kippur occur in collection, analysis, policy interface, or policymakers who had the information but failed to act? I'll let you decide. Or were there just underlying circumstances? Bad stuff happens. And we're going to look at these case studies, but I also want you to think about them going forward for other cases, whether it's the January 6th attack, September 11th, the October 7th Israel attack by Hamas, and ask, where did the failures occur in that chain? So readings, again, the Dahl, the Yom Kippur War, the Bruce Riedel, and the Al Jazeera documentary, The Crossing, which I will send the link out later on today because I think the earlier link got corrupted. So if there's questions or issues, please let me know, and I look forward to this week's discussions.